Think about the last time something genuinely good happened to you. A job offer, a first kiss, a piece of news you'd been waiting years for. Now think about what happened in the hours that followed, not the celebration, the thing underneath it. The small, almost imperceptible tightening in your chest, the voice that said, "This is too much." The instinct to put the phone down before fully reading the text, the impulse to find something wrong with what was clearly right. You are not bad at receiving good things. You are doing something more specific. You are running an old program your nervous system installed before you could read. The program is simple. When something good arrives, brace for what comes next. Because in your earliest years, every good thing was followed by something that hurt. And your nervous system, doing its best to protect you, learned to be afraid of the very thing it had been told to want. You are not afraid of failure. Failure is familiar. You know how to do failure. You have practiced it. What terrifies you is happiness, the actual arrival of it, the moment when there is nothing left to fix, nothing left to chase, nothing left to defend against. That moment, for most people listening to this, has not happened in years. And when it gets close, you do something to make it move away again. Freud diagnosed this exact pattern in 1916 in an essay so dark his own students refused to discuss it. He saw patient after patient who collapsed, not after losing what they wanted, but after finally getting it. He called them those wrecked by success. The phrase has been forgotten by modern psychology. It should be the most famous diagnosis Freud ever made, because it explains why you, right now, are doing something to keep your life 1 inch below the place where it could finally be good. By the end of this session, you'll know exactly what your nervous system thinks happiness costs you. Not the success anxiety answer, not the imposter syndrome answer, the deeper one. The one that explains why, even when nothing is wrong, you can't quite let yourself feel it. Stay with me. There's a patient I want to tell you about. He came to Freud in 1916, 2 months after receiving the academic appointment he had wanted since he was 19 years old. He arrived at Freud's office unable to get out of bed. I'll come back to him. Lie down. Close your eyes. This is your session. Let me describe the last good thing that happened to you. Maybe it was small, a compliment from someone whose opinion you cared about. Maybe it was larger, a promotion, a test result that came back fine when you had been bracing for catastrophe. Whatever it was, notice what your body did in the next hour. Most people listening to this will recognize the sequence. First, a brief moment of expansion, a small lift in the chest, maybe even a smile. Then, very quickly, the contraction, the tightening, the thought, often phrased as a question. What's the catch? This is going to fall apart. I shouldn't get too excited. You did not consciously generate these thoughts. They arrived, like a smoke alarm going off in a house that isn't on fire. Something inside you was scanning for danger before you had even finished receiving the good thing. If you have a partner, you may have noticed yourself starting a small argument that night, for no reason you can identify. If you live alone, you may have stayed up later than you should have, doing something that diluted the feeling. If you have a habit you reached for it. The phone, the wine, the screen, the food, something to dim the intensity of what was happening. Because the intensity, even though it was positive, was unbearable. You did not celebrate. You contained. If any of this sounds familiar, listen carefully. There is a specific name for what is happening to you. The clinical term is cherophobia, the fear of being happy. The Greek word chero means to rejoice. The Greek word phobia means fear. Together, the fear of rejoicing. And it is one of the most common, most undiagnosed, most ignored conditions in modern psychology. Almost no one will tell you that you have it. Almost everyone listening to this does. In 1916, Freud was 60 years old. He had been treating patients for 26 years. He had become, by any measure, the most famous psychologist in the world. The First World War was destroying Europe, and his patients were arriving with symptoms he could not place. The strangest of them were not the soldiers. The strangest were the people who had finally gotten what they wanted and could not enjoy it. He wrote an essay that year that almost no one reads now. Inside it, buried in the second section, was a category of patient he called those wrecked by success. He described them carefully. A young woman who had spent 8 years trying to marry the man she loved finally married him, and within months became so consumed by an irrational guilt that she could no longer be in the same room with him. A professor who had pursued an academic chair his entire career received the appointment, and on the morning of his first lecture could not get out of bed. A businessman who had built his company from nothing, sold it for an enormous sum, and within weeks attempted to take his own life. Freud noticed something the patients had not. The collapse was not random. The collapse was caused by an internal voice that, in the moment of triumph, became suddenly louder than it had ever been. The voice said one thing: "You do not deserve this." He had a name for that voice: the superego, the internalized authority, the parent inside the head. And what Freud realized in 1916, watching these patients break apart on the threshold of their own happiness, was that the superego does not punish you for what you did wrong. It punishes you for what you allowed yourself to have. Your superego is not your conscience. Your conscience is concerned with morality. Your superego is concerned with permission. And for most people listening to this, the permission was set very early, in a household where good things had consequences, where a happy child made a parent jealous, or angry, or absent, where joy was followed by a slap, or a silence, or a comment that made the joy feel embarrassing. The nervous system, which is just a learning machine, learned the equation: happiness, then danger; joy, then punishment; expansion, then the contraction that came to teach you not to expand again. You are not broken. You are precisely tuned. The tuning was done in a different environment. The tuning has not been updated. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena is a composite. She doesn't exist as one person, but every detail comes from real cases I've researched. She is 29. She lives in Madrid. She works as an architect at a prestigious firm. For 5 years, since she was 24, she has been chasing one specific thing: a senior position at a particular firm in Barcelona, run by an architect she has admired since university. It was the job she would have written down if asked, as a child, what success would look like for her. 3 months ago, she got it. The offer arrived by email on a Tuesday afternoon. Salary higher than she expected. Relocation covered. Title senior. Start date in 6 weeks. Elena read the email 3 times. Then she closed her laptop. Then she walked to her bedroom, lay down on top of the covers in her work clothes, and cried for 3 days. She did not know why. She did not feel sad. She felt something her language did not contain. She told her closest friend on day 4 that the news felt like a death. 6 weeks later, the day before she was supposed to fly to Barcelona, she emailed the firm and rescinded her acceptance. She gave a vague personal reason. The firm replied politely. She has not heard from them since. She has not told her parents what happened. She has stayed at her current job, where she is mildly bored and modestly paid. This was the 3rd time this pattern happened. 5 years ago, an architecture competition she won. She did not show up to the awards ceremony. 3 years ago, a relationship with a man she had wanted for 2 years. She broke up with him 6 weeks in, for reasons she still cannot explain. And now Barcelona. 3 opportunities, 3 sabotages, 1 pattern. Elena went to a therapist last month. She told the therapist she was self-destructive. The therapist asked her a question. The question was, what happened in your house when you came home with a good grade? Elena couldn't speak for a full minute. She had not thought about it in 20 years. What happened when she was a child was that her mother became withdrawn, cool, sometimes silent for an entire evening. Her father would notice eventually and become irritable with Elena, blaming her in some indirect way for whatever had happened to the mood of the house. Elena learned, before she was 8 years old, that her good news was dangerous, that her happiness shifted the temperature of the room, that the family was not stable enough to absorb her thriving. So she learned to dampen herself, to bring home moderate news, to never ever arrive triumphant. 25 years later, when the email from Barcelona arrived, her nervous system did what it had been trained to do. Good thing arriving. Bring the temperature back down. The crying was not sadness. The crying was the body refusing the dose of joy that history had taught it was poisonous. Freud would have understood Elena immediately. He would have said her superego had been calibrated in childhood to keep her precisely below the threshold of happiness her family system could tolerate. And he would have noted with characteristic darkness that the superego does not know the family system is changed. The superego is still running the program written for a 6-year-old in a particular kitchen, watching her mother go quiet. I want you to do something right now, before I continue. Place one hand on your stomach. Just rest it there. Take one slow breath. Notice if there is a small tightening, almost imperceptible, somewhere just below your ribs. For most people listening, there is. That tightening is the place your nervous system stores the warning. The warning that says, don't expand too much, don't take up too much room, don't let the feeling get too big. It is the somatic location of the prohibition against your own joy. It has been there in some form since you were very young. You have stopped noticing it because it never goes away. Keep your hand there for the rest of this session. If you've made it this far, the next part is the one most people refuse to hear. The reason you cannot let yourself be happy is not that something is wrong with you. It is that you are still loyal to a version of your family system that required you to stay small. Becoming happy now would feel to your nervous system like betrayal, like leaving them behind, like becoming someone they would not recognize or could not love, even if those people are dead, even if you barely speak to them, even if intellectually you have forgiven them. The body keeps the loyalty. And the loyalty whispers, every time something good arrives, you are not allowed. Self-sabotage is not random. Self-sabotage is a love letter to the people who taught you that thriving was unsafe. Now let me tell you about the patient I promised I would come back to. He came to Freud in October of 1916. He was 43 years old. He had spent 20 years working toward an academic appointment at the University of Vienna, the chair he had wanted since he was 19. The thing he had told his dying father, at age 22, that he would achieve. The appointment letter arrived in August. By September, he could not sleep. By early October, he could not get out of bed. The morning of his first scheduled lecture, his wife called Freud in desperation. He was lying in their bedroom, fully clothed, unable to move, repeating one phrase quietly. I cannot, I cannot, I cannot. Freud worked with him for 2 years. What they uncovered, slowly, was the deepest layer of the diagnosis. The patient's father had died of a heart attack at age 43, the same age the patient now was. The father had also been an academic, who had wanted, and never received, the very appointment his son had just been given. The patient had spent his entire adult life pursuing the thing his father could not have, and in the moment of finally surpassing his father, the patient's nervous system had executed an ancient command. You cannot have what your father did not have. To take it would be to kill him a second time. The patient did not consciously believe this. He would have called it absurd. But his body believed it. His body had spent 20 years moving toward the appointment, and the closer he got, the more strongly the body resisted. By the time the offer arrived, the resistance was complete. He could not enter the room where his triumph waited. The triumph would have required betraying the father he was still trying not to lose. The thing you want most is often the thing you are also forbidden, on some deep level, to have. Not by anyone outside you, by a part of you that loves someone who is no longer here, or who cannot tolerate your happiness, or who was in your earliest years the wound that taught you to want what you also refused. Your Elena moment, whatever it was the same mechanism, the job you didn't apply for, the person you pushed away, the opportunity you sabotaged, the good news you couldn't quite let yourself believe. They are all the same wound in different rooms. This connects to everything we've discussed. The empty success in episode 7 was this wound at the threshold. The imposter feeling in episode 14 was this wound preparing to refuse what was arriving. The avoidance in episode 18 was this wound's daily maintenance. They are all the same condition, expressed at different intensities. The fear of being happy is the foundation. Everything else is the architecture built on top of it. So what do? The answer is not to try to be happier. Trying to be happier is what triggers the alarm. The nervous system, watching you reach for joy, executes the program. Bring the temperature down. The harder you reach, the louder the alarm. What worked for Freud's patient? What works for Elena when she finally allows it? What will work for you? Is a very small and very specific practice. The next time something good happens, no matter how small, do not try to expand. Do not try to celebrate. Do not try to enjoy it. Do something even smaller. Notice the tightening. Notice the part of you that is bracing. Place your hand on the place in your body where the brace is happening and say quietly, "To that part, I see you." You can rest for 1 minute. Nothing bad will happen in the next minute. Then let the minute pass. The minute is the practice. The minute is what your nervous system has been waiting 20 or 30 years for someone to give it. 1 minute of joy that does not get punished. 1 minute of expansion that does not get contracted. The body learns, slowly, that the equation has changed. After enough minutes, the body begins to believe that joy is allowed, not enforced, not earned, just allowed. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one question, not what would make me happy. That question is too big and the system rejects it. The smaller, harder question, what was I not allowed to be happy about when I was a child? The answer, if you let it come, will arrive in the first 5 seconds. It will probably surprise you. It will probably be small, a friend your mother didn't like, a talent your father couldn't tolerate, a piece of yourself the family system could not absorb. Whatever it is, that is the original prohibition. Everything you cannot let yourself have now is some version of that original thing. You don't need to be happy yet. You need to let the part of you that was forbidden to be happy know that you finally heard her, or him. The rest comes slowly. In our next session, we'll talk about the active version of this wound, the way the prohibition does not just dampen your joy, but actively destroys the things you build. We'll talk about why you sabotage yourself, and why Freud again named the precise mechanism 100 years ago, while we have spent a century pretending we discovered it ourselves. This has been your session on Sigmund Freud Explains You. If you want to understand what your mind is hiding from you, subscribe. New sessions every day.